Cheers. That's pretty good. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. Hi, my name is Liz and today we're going to be doing the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. First of all, that's crazy hearing 2025. It's a very satisfying looking year. I did put together a list for today to talk about 25 different books that I really want to read at some point in this year. I'm not necessarily going to be putting them in a bunch of different TBR videos. It's more so just these are books I hope I read. Some of them have been on my TBR for years and years, so that's why I'm putting them in this list, because I really want to finally read them and get them off of my physical TBR. Some of these are newer books that I just have been wanting to read for a while, or some of them are just books that I've heard be talked very highly about. Other people have rated them very highly, so it makes me want to then read them and also be a part of that conversation of the book. I do have a nice range of genres to talk about today, and we're going to go through by genre each of the books that I really want to read in 2025. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first genre we're going to be talking about today is romance. This first book that I want to talk about is The Pickup by Nora Dalia. I just bought this right before Christmas, and as soon as I saw it when it came out in December, I knew I immediately wanted to read it because it just looks like such a funny, cute romance. And it's a little different than other romances I typically read because it follows a single mom and a single dad. They kind of battle it out at school drop-off and school pickup over parking spots. And I just knew immediately that sounds really cute and funny, and I just think it's going to be really fun to see parents kind of acting immature. There's definitely going to be a lot of tension when it comes to the two, and it'll be a deeper type of romance because these are parents and they both know what it's like to be a single parent, and I think that's going to be really beautiful to see how they navigate that. Also, like with co-parenting and things in the story, they both get a job opportunity that can take them to this private island. They both end up doing it. I'm not exactly 100% sure what that job opportunity is. It probably has something to do with like PTA or something like that. It's going to be a lot of forced proximity. I'm sure there's going to be lots of tension. This is what I deal with all day, every day. Milo and Murphy are going feral today, apparently. Next up, we have Rachel Weisz's Group Chat by Lauren Applebaum. This is another book that I saw and I immediately knew I wanted to read, mainly because it follows our main character. She's about to turn 30. She falls for the wrong guys, so she's not doing great when it comes to relationships. And her friend group is starting to kind of fall apart. She's feeling very isolated, and she decides to confide in her tech bro neighbor, which just sounds hilarious. And they start up kind of a pen pal relationship. If you know me, if you have followed me at all for any of my videos, you probably know that I love a good pen pal relationship in my romance books. I think it's so cute. I feel like characters are able to really just be vulnerable with each other, things that you wouldn't say face to face. It's kind of like you're confiding in the dark, essentially, and it feels like you can open up a little bit more and kind of create a deeper foundation amongst the two and starting off their relationship. I'm really, really excited to read this book. I think it's gonna be really cute and a really fun and maybe quirky read. Next, we are getting into literary fiction. If you watched my 2024 wrap up, then you know that one of my goals for this year is to read more literary fiction. I only read one literary fiction book in 2024. And there's certain like specific authors I'm really wanting to get into in 2025. First one being Fredrik Backman. I really, really want to read Beartown. I know this is a trilogy. Beartown has been on my list for a while now, and I'm really excited to read it. All I knew whenever I bought this book was it follows a small town who kind of worships hockey. Hockey is like the key to this town. Everyone's priority is hockey. I did buy this book right after Christmas, and I will say I read the first page. What an attention grabber. That honestly threw me for a loop. I didn't realize the book was going to be about that, but I'm very, very intrigued. I've heard great things about this author. I've heard that he just does a really great job talking about different family dynamics and friend dynamics and just anything and everything you can think about that's very relatable to a lot of people. He is able to kind of navigate that in a very sincere and just very gentle way. So I'm very, very excited to read this book and finally be a part of that conversation about Fredrik Backman. Next, another author author that I really, really want to read this year because I've heard amazing things about her is Kristen Hanna. I really want to read The Nightingale. There's other books by this author that I also want to read this year, but this is the first one I think I'm going to read, mainly because that's the one I've heard the most about. This book follows two sisters during World War II, and both are taking two very different paths during this. I've heard it's very beautiful, and it's also very sad and depressing, so I'm ready to cry. This is the year that I cry during my reading. It's been a long time since I've cried during one of my books while reading one of my books. I'm actually very excited to have a good cry. I've heard amazing things about Kristen Hanna. She's great at historical fiction. I haven't read a ton of historical fiction, and that's part of the reasons why I haven't read any of her books. So this is the year that I read Kristen Hanna's books. And while we're on the topic of being emotional and crying during my reading, we have A Little Life by, I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, Hanya Yanagihara. I have no clue. I've heard so many things about this book, about how people don't recommend it, mainly because it will take you for a ride, and it talks about a lot of triggering subjects, and I feel like I just need to finally read this book. I know it's a book that people say that they don't recommend, mainly because you need to be in a very good place in your life in order to read this book and not have an emotional breakdown. Going into it knowing that I'm about to go on an emotional roller coaster, I feel like I'm prepared, at least somewhat. I'm also planning on buddy reading this book with two other friends of mine who are going to be reading this book. If I have two other people who are going through the same emotional torment that I'm going through, I think it'll be manageable. All I know about the story is it follows four college roommates or college classmates, I'm not sure, who are kind of going through life together and are trying to find themselves. I have no clue what this book has in store for me, but I think it's going to be quite the ride. Next up, we have The Push by Ashley Audren. I have heard great things about this book. If you have any doubts when it comes to motherhood, this will make you question everything when it comes to motherhood. It follows our main character who just had her daughter and she believes something is wrong with her child. I'm not sure what direction this book is going to take. I don't know if it's going to be like more of like a paranormal-ish type route, or I don't know if it's going to take more of like a, okay, my kid is a serial killer. I'm very interested to see what happens. It's going to challenge everything we think we know about motherhood and what we owe our children, and also what it feels like when a woman is not believed. Next up, we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I've been wanting to read this book for such a long time, and it's finally time for me to read it. It follows an author who witnesses another author being killed and decides to steal that author's work and claims it as her own. It's truly going to show you how far someone's willing to go to get what they want. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. I feel like it's just going to be a spiral of bad decisions, this entire book. Next up, we have Vox by Christina Dalcher. This is a really good story for fans of The Handmaid's Tale, which I personally really like The Handmaid's Tale. I've also read The Grace Year, which is very similar to The Handmaid's Tale, and I really, really enjoyed it. This story is a dystopian world where women are only allowed to speak 100 words per day, and it's going to follow a woman who is trying to reclaim her voice for herself and for her daughters. I think it's going to be a very interesting take on The Handmaid's Tale. I'm really intrigued to see how this whole speaking thing works. What happens if you go over 100 words, and like how do women pace themselves throughout the day to make sure that they only speak 100 words. Obviously, it's silencing women, and I think it's just going to be a very fascinating read. Next up, we have Starter Villain by John Scalzi. The only reason why, well, not the only reason, the main reason why I want to read this book is the cover. I just can't get over it. It's so funny. It follows a man who inherits his uncle's supervillain business. Some of the blurbs that it says on the back, it says it includes unionized dolphins, hyper-intelligent talking spy cats, and a terrifying henchman. That's all you need to get me to read a book. Next, we have the only thriller that I am for sure going to read this year, and that is Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams. Taylor Adams is a really great thriller author that I personally really enjoy reading. I read The Last Word, I've read No Exit by Taylor Adams, and I loved both of them. I gave both of them 5 stars. I loved them so much. I think this author does a really good job with making it actually thrilling and suspenseful the entire time you're reading. It's very fast paced. It grabs you from the very beginning, and you do not know what's going to happen until the very end. This story follows a girl who is trying to figure out what happened to her twin sister. Supposedly, her twin sister drove 70 or 80 miles outside of town to this bridge called Hairpin Bridge, and she just jumped to her death. Our main character, she knows her sister. She knows that she would never do that willingly, so she starts to investigate and try to figure out what actually happened, and in turn puts herself in danger. I'm really excited for this book. I think it's going to have a really cool twist, and I'm really interested and intrigued to see what journey our author takes us on in this book. Next, we're going to talk about some fantasy fantasies. Yes, I have a lot of fantasies that I want to read this year. First up, we have Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. This is a book that's been on my list forever to read. I just can't go another year without finally reading this book. Our main character, she was born with a link to 5 different dragons, which immediately intrigues me. I love any book that involves dragons. And it also follows 5 people who decide to team up to infiltrate an enemy castle. Very excited to see what happens in this book. Ow! You're hurting me. Brief intermission while I try to tame my cats. Next up, we have Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. This is actually 1, 2, and 3. So these are 3 different books. It's a trilogy that I really want to read. I love Carissa Broadbent. She wrote The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I love her writing. Her writing is very fast-paced. There's not a lot of world building. It kind of just throws you in right at the beginning and you kind of figure it out as you go, which is one thing I really, really like about this author. Our main character in this trilogy, she is a former slave who escapes and decides to seek shelter by joining a group called the Orders. And this is a group of people who are magic welders, so they are very powerful, and in order to join this group she has to apprentice under a fire wielder in order to eventually join this group. I've heard amazing things about this trilogy and I've just waited too long to finally read it. Along the same line, I have another trilogy that I want to read, and that is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber. I've read the Caraval series or trilogy and I really enjoyed it. I love this author's writing. It's very lyrical, very poetic, and very beautiful. But this is a spin-off trilogy that follows Jax, the Prince of Hearts. That's all I really know, and it follows our girl who strikes up a deal with him. I really loved Jax's character in Caraval, and I'm excited to see what happens in this world. Next up, we have The Unmaking of June Farrow. This is by Adrienne Young, which is the author of oh shoot, what's that book called? I will put a picture of the book somewhere on the screen. This world follows our main character, who is a woman who travels through time to try to end her family's curse and also to find her mother who disappeared. I don't know much else besides that, but also I've heard that it's a really good standalone fantasy, which is hard to come by nowadays. So I'm actually really excited to read just a nice standalone fantasy. Also, the cover is gorgeous. That's one of the reasons why immediately I wanted to read this book when I first saw it. Next, we have Under the Oak by Suji Kim. This is a written out novel of a graphic novel or a web novel series. I bought it, not gonna lie, because of the cover. I am planning on buying the graphic novel as well, and I think I'm gonna buddy read them. I'm gonna read the physical, like written out version of the story while also flipping through the graphic novel at the same time, so I can kind of figure out like how to picture things as I'm going. This is a world that follows a young woman who is forced to marry a knight. This knight then leaves the next day. They also have a very bad first impression of each other. He leaves for war. He returns 3 years later, and they now have to figure out how to be husband and wife, and she's trying to figure out how to run a household, and I think there's some magic thrown in there. I'm not really sure. This book, I think, is just going to be like candy when I read it. It's not one that I'm like expecting to wow me, which I think is a good thing, but I'm also excited. I haven't really read a ton of graphic novels. I haven't hardly read any, actually. I'm excited to read a graphic novel that was also turned into its own written out novel as well. And the final fantasy book that I want to read is A Tribute of Fire by Soraya Wilson. This story follows a princess who is thrown into a set of deadly trials. Wow, shocker. In order to lift a goddess's curse and restore her nation's former glory. I don't know much about this book, I'm not gonna lie. But when I saw it, I knew I had to read it. I'm hoping that first impressions, me being shallow and judging a book by its cover, means that it's gonna be a great book. I haven't heard a ton of people talk about this book. I have no clue. I haven't checked Goodreads or anything. I have no clue what people are saying about this story, but I know that I want to read it. I think I'm gonna ignore the internet and I'm just gonna go into a blind and see what happens. Next, we have a graphic novel. So like I said, I'm trying to get into graphic novels this year. I'm sorry if you can hear. He's chasing his tail. My cat is a dog. But I said I wanted to read graphic novels this year, and one of them that I want to read is Extraordinary by V.E. Schwab. This is the same universe or world as Vicious and Vengeful, which I read Vicious and I really enjoyed it. It's a world where if people die but come back, like are revived, then they end up with a superpower, essentially. Our main character, she ends up in a bus crash. It's fatal. She dies, but she is revived and brought back, and she ends up with a power. I'm not sure what her power is going to be yet, but I have a feeling it's going to be a fun ride. And the final 4 books that I want to read this year is a 4-book series called The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have read the Inheritance Games trilogy. I really enjoyed it. It was very fast paced. Chapters are very short, but I'm extra excited about this series, mainly because it follows a group of teenagers who are all recruited by the FBI. And just think Criminal Minds. If you've ever watched Criminal Minds, think that, but with teenagers. They are hunting down serial killers. And I love Criminal Minds. It's one of my favorite shows to watch. And I'm really, really excited to see that in a a book form with teenagers. Each of the different teenagers I think has a different kind of ability. Not like superhero like magic or anything, but like one could be really good at profiling, one's really good with technology and like hacking. This is another book or series that has been on my list for a really, really long time, and it's finally time for me to read it. I'm hoping that by having this list of 25 books, it forces me to finally read these books. And those are the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am personally very, very pumped for the year of 2025. I think it's gonna be a good one. Based on this list, I know I'm gonna have some really great reads that are gonna be on my radar all year long, and I'm so incredibly excited to finally read them and be able to talk about them. Lots of fun goals for the year, trying out new authors, trying out some new genres like graphic novels, and I think it's just gonna be a great time, and I cannot wait to take you guys along with me. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.